everyone. Thank you for joining us for a special episode or a special clip of GenYnot. We are here to bring you a quick conversation about what's going on in the media, particularly around a great initiative that was announced by President Barack Obama. But first, I'm back with my co-host, and I'm actually here with Jordan and Austin.
Unfortunate.
We haven't killed each other yet, so there's a whole nother 8 minutes for that possibility. But hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Daniel's still in the cold weather of New York.
I am in the cold weather of New York.
That sucks.
We're actually
it happens
here, even though we're in Austin because of climate change.
But it's not like New York.
It's like 20, 30, 40 degrees.
No, it's
here.
not. It's 50-something degrees.
It's cold. It should not be that in Texas in March.
Okay, because Texas has a requirement.
But hello, everyone. I hope y'all are well. We've missed you.
Yay.
Well, I have. I can't speak for them.
I have, which is why we're doing this special clip. And to get started, we're doing a special clip on My Brother's Keeper. Many of you have probably heard about it, saw it, seen someone tweet about it, retweeted, seen a Facebook post. My Brother's Keeper was announced by President Barack Obama last week, which is an opportunity for government officials, government entities, nonprofit philanthropy organizations, and community members to all work together to expand and elevate the trajectory of black men or men of color in our communities. So how can we work together to create solutions for employment, for elevating their stories of positivity, but also creating a space where black men or men of color have added value to our society versus looked at as a cost deficit or criminals. And so I'm excited to talk about this initiative, especially since I come from a family of men of color, particularly black men, who have helped to shape and cultivate the person I am today. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to elevate those stories and to continue to make sure that we engage men of color in a way that is beneficial to our society, because black bodies have value. So with that being said, I'm curious to see what you and Daniel think about this announcement.
But there are still other parts of the initiative that Daniel should add some more before we go into, our personal perspective. So Daniel, Jamira seems like she has a problem.
Because that's not how we said we were going to do that. If you listen to
yes, we did.
No, we didn't.
We did.
No, we didn't.
Okay, well, I'll go. I'll talk.
Thank you.
Since I'm black, of course I'm all for black male engagement.
Are you? Okay. Talk about blackmeetpeoplemeet.com. Okay. Tell all your personal information.
She's so inappropriate. So I think that this is a super important initiative. One of the most important initiatives that President Obama's administration has passed. It was really exciting when he announced it a few weeks ago, because you saw a bunch of not only just black men, but people that were just like, wow, like our president. And you have the Obama administration and the federal government saying, you know what, we have failed young men of color across the nation. And I think that, like, just that notion in itself was so powerful, because they finally said, like, okay, we understand that black men and brown men are disproportionately affected by issues when you talk about violence or education, and there is a reason why they are behind and far more behind than everyone else. So we need to create a program specifically for them because they are important and they have value. And when our federal government says that and starts that conversation, that's dope. That's really dope. We can get into like the politics of like how much money, but I think for like one to really start that conversation and to say we have failed you and we're not doing enough, it's dope.
So before I turn to Daniel, it's one thing I want to add. It's just that at a conference I was just at, one thing that one of the speakers mentioned is that the only thing that black men are leading the country in, which benefits the country, is Social Security, because they don't live long enough to actually collect, which.
Wow.
So, but Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah. So, obviously, I think it was super powerful to see the president make the statement. I think, especially in light of him having Trayvon's family and Jordan's family in the room, right, and being very blatant about bringing them into the conversation and being like, we can't have any more Trayvons or any more Jordan Davises. I think it's interesting that it's young men of color, right, in general, from Latinos to Southeast Asians. I think that the conversation we have oftentimes is about black men, and for obvious reasons, right? There's like whole organizations that exist, and so basically one of the big factors of, well, one of the pieces of the initiative is this campaign being put forth by California Endowment, who actually put $50 million into the pot, right, of philanthropy for this initiative that's called Sons and Brothers, that focuses, like the initiative, obviously, on creating this national conversation about our sons and brothers and what it means to uplift them, right? When you think about stats like 1 in 3 black men will be in prison sometime in their lifetime in the United States, or the fact that young Latino men are 3 times as likely to be impacted by gun violence as their white counterparts. And so when you have stats like that, and when you're trying to piece all of this together, I think it's important. It's so big to have the White House, right, the president, do this initiative, because, you know, even though it's just an initiative, and a lot of people are criticizing it for various reasons, I think it sets the precedent for what will happen next when, you know, what if a white president comes into office, right? Like, are we still going to be having these conversations about our young men of color?
So it's interesting that you said that, because yes, I applaud Barack Obama for doing President Barack Obama. Yes, because he is the president. Some people, you know, but I would say, based on your last comment, is that it's interesting because regardless of, I think, whether the next president is white, there are organizations, like you mentioned, that have been doing this work for decades, and who have started initiatives in the last 5 years that are really trying to change the trajectory of men of color. For instance, during the Barack Obama announcement of My Brother's Keeper, Cities United, which is a collaborative effort of more than 50 mayors from around the country, created by 2 mayors, Mayor Michael Nutter from Philadelphia and Mayor Mitch Landrieu from New Orleans, came together and thought about what is the biggest, what can we do to really stop the deaths of black men of color, because they are more than 70% in most cities, major cities, the victims as well as the perpetrators. And so Cities United looks at a very narrow base of black men of color, because, to be honest, those are one of the largest groups of people who are disenfranchised in the United States. And so during the president's announcement, we were actually participating in a convening in New Orleans, where we brought together 18 different mayors as well as 50 different metropolitans. I can't even get out. 15 different city governments from around the country to talk about how can we move the needle forward. And so after the president announcement, you had a table of 18 different mayors, and President Obama actually called Cities United and to thank them for the work that they're doing, because I think because it's extremely important, because you need these philanthropy organizations, these city agencies, because one, mayors are the ones on the ground in the local communities who can actually have the larger impact. And so we talked about philanthropy organizations. You have Casey Family Programs, you have the National League of Cities, who are all helping to push Cities United forward. One of the criticisms, and then I'll pass it to Jordan, that came about is that many people are afraid that particularly black men who, like I mentioned, is disproportionately the most disenfranchised group in the United States, are going to be whitewashed, are going to be watered down in this conversation of men of color, just because people feel like President Barack Obama, unfortunately, is trying to combine all the minorities together, and in doing so, will end up trying to do everything instead of focusing on a group and doing that well and then moving on. And so I think that's one of my biggest concerns, is that making sure that we don't water down the work that is being done around black men of color, or black men.
So I would just want to point out, throw out a stat really quickly, because that whole young men of color, what does that mean? That's it's super broad. And it's not just, it doesn't just mean black, even though back in, the 50s, they used to call us colored. No?
And I'm just curious the way you're going with this.
So I just wanted to point out a stat, roughly 33% of young men from Southeast Asian communities didn't finish high school, as compared to only 7% of young white men. Just to point out the fact that this isn't, and even this My Brother's Keeper isn't just for black males, because when you look at how young men of color look up to versus white communities, they're failing and disproportionately failing. So, but I wanted to talk about the opposing view. So some people are saying yeah, this is a great initiative from the White House, great. Obama says they matter, but how much money is being put forth? So you have the work that's being done. You have the work that people have been doing all across the nation for years and decades. But the White House is putting up $200 million. Isn't enough? How can you give that to communities? What communities are going to get it? Which ones aren't going to get it? and why wasn't there more money put forth for this initiative?
And that's the thing. So the White House isn't putting $200 million. Philanthropy organizations like the California Endowment, like Bloomberg, is putting money forward for this initiative. But the thing, that's what I mean. Like, not only is the pot of money too small, and yes, by the president announcing this, it legitimizes the work, which is an interesting concept. But the $200 million is such a small pot, and then when you talk about men of color, that's a larger group that you now have to affect versus just trying to narrow in on one group. And I do understand, like, there's work that needs to be done in the Latino community, the Asian community, the African American community. But I think I don't want the work that is being done around black men to be watered down, because, like, be watered down. I'm not just saying this as a black woman. I'm saying this as I feel like they are the ones disproportionately, largely disenfranchised, and I don't want that to be watered down by the politics of keeping all the minorities together.
Right. But I think it's hard to divide that. I definitely understand this idea of siloing for purpose, right? But I think it's hard when race is obviously such a complex issue, and when you get into mixed race individuals and so on and so forth. And so seeing that young men of color, right? Because we can also talk about young men of color, and I think I've heard some pushback or I've heard some statements, not necessarily facts all the time, but, like, you know, about Asian individuals or Asian males and being predominantly affluent, and, like, all these things that there's just all these things that come when you use such a broad term as young men of color. And I do think that the way it's designed, that programs can be based on certain race and certain ideas, right? So you think of the groups that are involved with this, and I think that there is that division, right? You have your very Latino-based organizations, just as you have your very black male achievement type groups, right? And so I think that that's a way to divide the work to an extent.
No, I get that part, that individually organizations can have a single focus, but I think when you have the President of the United States talking about, like, this initiative is going to be focused on men of color, and he only has $200 to divide, the question is, how is that going to be divided, particularly when you have such a broad group of men of color?
So one thing that it does, when the federal government says this initiative is important, and kind of makes it, because one thing, so we have this, we're experts of our own experiences, right? We're black, he's Latino. Like, we know that the engagement in our communities is needed. We know that
the numbers.
We know that this is a problem.
It's not about, like, knowing it's a problem. It's about,
we know that it's a problem. And I think a lot of times, like, we forget that we're experts of our own experiences, and sometimes other people don't know that, like, oh wow, that's sad. So, like, black men really aren't graduating out of college and are dropping out at rates that, like, we don't understand. So I think that initiatives like this make it sexy for the foundations with so much money. The foundation and nonprofit community give $9 billion a year. So, like, that makes it the White House and President Obama saying this is an initiative that we need to get behind, and we're starting the money. Money can be trickled to that, because there's so much money in the nonprofit community, in the foundation community. So now it's him saying, yo, step up. We think that this is important, so y'all should get on board.
We'll see.
I guess we just got to see what happens. But let us know what you all think.
Yes, and continue the conversation.
Yeah. # GenYnot.